Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the Russian economy, and specifically to talk about the fundamental problem that Russia now has with regards to its population. On November the 12th, the lower house of parliament in Russia voted unanimously in favour of banning what's been called pernicious propaganda for a child-free way of life. So from this point on, it will no longer be possible in Russia to promote a child-free existence. So if you wanted to set up your YouTube channel to talk about how great your life is, how well it's going, the fact that you haven't got any kids and you can travel the world and do what you like and you've got lots of disposable income, then you're going to be fined and possibly even arrested. And the reason why this has happened is because Russia currently has one of the lowest birth rates in the whole of the world. In the first half of 2024, 599,600 children were born in Russia, which was 16,000 less than the same period for 2023, and the lowest since 1999. And the figures released for the month of June, which is the latest month that we have on record, show that only 98,600 babies were born, which is the first time ever in Russia's history that the birth rate has fallen below 100,000 in any single month. And the CIA World Factbook, which yes is written by the Central Intelligence Agency of the USA, but is an internationally regarded source of information, shows that the current birth rate of 8.4 births per 1,000 citizens in Russia ranks Russia as the 209th country in the world. And the CIA Factbook only has 228 countries recorded. And if you're interested, the country with the lowest birth rate in the whole of the world at the moment, not surprisingly, is Ukraine, with 6 births per 1,000 citizens. Now, before we go on any further today, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Ground News, that I've been working with for more than 2 years, and who are offering Joe Blogs viewers an exclusive 50% discount on their unlimited Vantage plan, which is what I use. And what's great about Ground News is that they're a news aggregator. They bring together stories from all around the world. So that means that I can access all of this data in one place without spending hours and hours searching around on the web. And if we look at the articles relating to the ban on child-free propaganda, you can see that Ground News has pulled together 45 different articles. And what's great about Ground News is that it identifies the political bias. So it tells you if the article leans to the left, leans to the right, or comes from the centre, which is really important to me as I'm trying to provide a balanced viewpoint. And the great news is that Joe Blogs viewers can get a 50% discount on the unlimited Vantage plan. And if you've already got one, then why don't you think about gifting one to somebody else this holiday season? And you can access this by clicking in the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on the screen now. And the reason why this falling birth rate is so concerning from Russia's point of view is because its death rate is rising rapidly. And currently Russia is ranked at number 9 in the world in the CIA World Factbook, with a death rate of 14 citizens per 1,000. And out of interest, the 8 countries with a higher death rate are Moldova and Bulgaria, which come in at number 8 and 7 with a death rate of 14.2 per 1,000. Hungary comes in at number 6 with 14.5. Romania at 14.6 comes in at number 5. Latvia comes in at number 4 with a death rate of 14.7. Serbia is number 3 with a death rate of 14.9, Lithuania number 2 with a death rate of 15.2, and number 1 is Ukraine with a death rate of 18.6 people per 1,000 citizens. Now, if you've been following the channel, you'll know that we've talked about the Russian population and the fundamental problems in Russia a number of times previously. But the situation is actually getting worse because the birth rate is falling and the death rate is rising. And as you can see from this graphic, Russia's population pyramid, which splits out its population into different age categories of 5 years, from 0 to 4 at the bottom to 100 plus at the top, shows that the biggest single age category is 35 to 39, and Russia has a tapering pyramid, so you can see the direct impact of the falling birth rate as the number of people in each of the age categories below 35 gets smaller. And this shape of population pyramid causes major problems for countries because it means that you've got an ageing population, and therefore the burden on looking after people who are going into retirement is falling on a smaller number of workers. And that's one of the issues that Russia will have over the long term. But in the short term, Russia has a workforce shortage. It simply doesn't have enough people to fill all of the jobs that are available. And that's why the unemployment figures are currently very low, because Russia isn't able to fill all of the jobs. But the other major thing to note about this pyramid is that the number of females is much larger than the number of males. The current population of Russia is estimated to be around 140 million, and the split is 65 million men and 75 million women. Now, in terms of whether or not the new law banning propaganda on child-free families is going to work and encourage Russian women to have more children, I think we need to answer the question as to why people in Russia have pulled back on having families. This chart shows the annual change in the population in Russia between 1980 and 2023. And the scale on the left-hand side of this chart shows the increase or decrease in the population measured in hundreds of thousands, and goes from minus 1 million at the bottom to plus 1 million at the top. And the zero line across the middle indicates no change in the population. What this chart shows is that between 1980 and 1990, during the Soviet Union era, the population was increasing. And in the late 1980s, it was increasing by more than 1 million people per year. However, the Soviet Union started to fall apart in the late 1980s and was officially broken up in 1991. And you can see that that had a dramatic impact on the change in the population. It went from heavily positive to heavily negative. And by 2000, the population was falling by more than 1 million people per year. Now, not surprisingly, Russia identified this as a major problem, and so they introduced a variety of different initiatives to try to encourage more people to have children. And by 2010, the population had stabilised, and between 2011 and 2014, there was a small increase. However, following the annexation of Crimea and the financial sanctions that were applied against Russia, we saw the birth rate starting to fall again, and you can see that there was once again a dramatic fall in the Russian population. And what this chart is showing us is that the birth rate is linked to what's going on in the economy. Immediately following the breakup of the Soviet Union, the Russian economy went into recession, and a lot of people were very concerned about their livelihoods because they'd gone from working for a communist state to working in a capitalist environment, and so nobody was really sure what was going to happen, whether or not they would continue with their jobs, whether they could earn more money, and this uncertainty resulted in a huge drop in the birth rate. Now, the birth rate recovered as the government started to introduce initiatives, and also people became more comfortable with the new capitalist environment after around 10 or 15 years. However, the financial sanctions that have been applied against Russia since 2014 have started to hurt the Russian economy, and once again we've seen a dip in the birth rate. So what we are seeing here is that the birth rate is directly linked to what's going on in the economy. So to answer the question as to whether or not this new law will have the desired impact and will increase the birth rate, I don't think the birth rate is low because there's lots of propaganda. People are listening to publishers saying, don't have any children, you'll have a better life. I think it's more linked to what's happening with people's income. And in order to verify that, let's hear from a couple of Russian women that were interviewed recently.
Banning child-free propaganda, well, it won't do much. Because the problem, again, is that people don't want to have children. Women don't give birth, families don't have children, not because they've been told something somewhere. It's still a strong instinct. People want to have children, but they don't have the money. That's why people don't have kids, not because of something someone wrote somewhere.
I think that people have children when they are confident about the future, but when mortgage interest reaches 20% a year, I don't think it's a favorable time to have children in unlimited numbers.
So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think what's going on with the Russian population is really quite fascinating. The Russian population has been in decline for a long period of time as a result of a stagnantly low birth rate. The fertility rate in Russia, which is different to the birth rate, looks at the number of children each woman in Russia is having, and it's currently sitting at 1.5. And in order to have a stable population, you would need to have a fertility rate of 2.1. And interestingly, the fertility rate in the USA is currently around 1.8. However, the USA's fertility rate is supplemented by immigration. Lots of people constantly want to move to the USA, and so it can have a lower fertility rate and still have an increasing population because lots of people are coming to America all of the time. But unfortunately for Russia, the dynamic just isn't the same. There aren't the same number of people who want to move to Russia permanently. So we've got a declining population as a result of the fact that the birth rate has been falling, and also we've got an increase in the death rate. It was recently reported that on November the 11th, which ironically is Armistice Day when they signed the treaty at the end of World War I, and the anniversary of that is celebrated in many countries around the world. It's called Veterans Day in the USA. On that day, it was reported that 1,770 Russians died in the war in Ukraine, and that was actually a new record. The previous high was 1,740 on the 13th of May 2024. So the death rate is rising at the same time as the birth rate is falling, and that means that Russia has a declining population, and it's now struggling to be able to fill all of the available jobs. And if you can't get people into those jobs, that means that productivity is going to start reducing. And all of this is having a hugely negative impact on the Russian economy. We've talked about it lots of times before. But one of the problems that Russia has right now is because of rising inflation, which is partly caused by that shortage of workers, which has resulted in an increase in wages, which means that people have more money, therefore they're spending more, and that drives up prices at the same time as the value of the ruble has fallen, so the price of imports has also gone up. That rise in inflation has resulted in the Bank of Russia increasing interest rates on 8 separate occasions over the last 17 months to the current level of 21%. And the problem when interest rates hit 21% is that it means it's very expensive to borrow money. So if you're a Russian citizen and you want to get out a mortgage, then you're likely to have to pay above 21%, maybe 25%, maybe 30% for your mortgage. That is prohibitively high. But also, if you want to borrow money to go on holiday or to finance the birth of your child, if you're thinking, well, I might have another child, but I need to get some money so I could go to the bank, nobody wants to borrow at 20+% interest rates. So the economic factors are having a hugely negative impact on the birth rate. It's very expensive to have a family. Anybody that's had children will know that it's a large financial commitment. And when you've got the economy going down and you've got interest rates going up, that isn't going to encourage anybody to have more children. So the new law that's been passed by the Russian authorities banning propaganda on child-free activities and not having any children isn't really going to solve the problem. The fundamental problem is because the Russian economy isn't doing particularly well. That's resulted in interest rates being very high. It's also resulted in high levels of inflation. So prices are rising all the time. And those factors are likely to mean that people have less money to spend and therefore are less likely to think about having any children or any more children. So passing a law banning propaganda doesn't really fix the fundamental problem in the economy right now. So it's likely that Russia will continue to see a low birth rate. The death rate is likely to remain high whilst the war in Ukraine is ongoing, and those two factors mean Russia will have a reducing population, therefore it will struggle to get enough workers. That means reduced productivity. That means the economy slowing down, possibly going into recession, and all of that is bad news for the birth rate, and we have got a very vicious circle that's difficult to break out of. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.